Morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning. Hey, hope everybody's good. Just want to kind of welcome everybody, and hey, it's the 1st of October. 3 months to go for the end of the year. Wow. What did you do with the year, Dave?
Trying to figure it out.
I mean, you wasted it away. Last time I looked, it was March.
Yeah, I remember when the summer solstice began. We thought, well, it's the end of the year. We better start getting our Christmas list ready. And it's almost like that right now, isn't it? It's like
I haven't got a Christmas list. I haven't got a Christmas list ready. You know, don't know that we can afford one.
So just send a bunch of IOUs or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Gary's saying looking forward to seeing you later today, Dave.
Yes. I'm and as I told Gary, the deal here is that that if I wear a Donald Trump mask, he'll buy me a bunch of, he'll buy me a couple of pounds of wings at a bar. And I says, I have a very low regard for Donald Trump. I think he's the devil's handmaid. And but 2 pounds of wings is 2 pounds of wings, So yeah.
There you go. Right. So
well, actually, I think it was 3 pounds of wings, but I don't think I'd be able to eat 3 pounds of wings. So. That's it. I think we're supposed to meet at noon, aren't we? Aren't we, Gary?
What's going on here? Okay. That was weird. Okay. He says, I'll get you 3 pounds. There you go. All right. So, first story of the day. But Pope Francis says the Belgian clergy abuse victims deserve more compensation. Isn't it the Catholic Church that need to provide said compensation?
Yes, the Pope has argued that these are the abuse of these children needs more compensation from I think probably the Belgian diocese or the diocese in Belgium. The kind of compensation is compensatory, I guess.
Well, one of the questions I spoke to a Catholic a while back whose biggest concern in all of this was that the compensation levels could potentially bankrupt the Catholic Church. Hello? Dave?
Here we are.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, so I was saying one Catholic that I was talking to was saying he was concerned the levels of compensation could bankrupt the church.
Well, they try to play fast and loose, as I think it was Minnesota or Michigan or something like that, when the court found the church responsible and were supposed to pay out. What they did was then transfer all their funds to the Vatican, and therefore avoid having to pay. But the church itself didn't think that was a good idea, particularly.
Losing you again, Dave. Hey, I don't know what's happened with Dave. I think he probably is going to end up popping off and coming back again. Yeah, so
But
essentially,
it was the people in Chile who kind of forced his hand.
Yeah, we lost you for a second there. And we lost him again. All right. So I don't know what's happened there, Dave. Yeah, you're right. The people from Chile kind of forced his hand because they said it's not enough. And the truth is, it's not enough. There's no amount of compensation that can really can repay this scandal. The question here is, and also the church has not been seen to do enough either. It's one thing for the Pope to make statements that it isn't enough, but it's quite different. It's quite different, the reality that these people face. Let's see if we can get Dave back. Hello, there you go.
Yeah, I hope it holds this time.
Yeah, I hope it holds this time. I don't know what's happened to the. I've got another one. Okay, it's gone. That one's gone. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say the whole level of compensation on all of this and the victims that have been, the victims that have been on it. It's all, it's particularly out of hand. And what have they really done to assure the public that it's not going to happen in the future?
Yes. Yeah. How? Well, there's a lot of eyes on the Catholic Church now, and I have to bring in William O'Sullivan into this discussion because he is an individual that has actually walked all the way to Ottawa as part of a demonstration.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church has been able to cover things up and try to cool down the whole idea, but I mean it's out in the open, and the Pope has to deal with it.
Yeah.
So and Mike Cushman says priests should have wives, then maybe they will not harm children. The problem here is pedophilia, and it's a big difference from homosexuality or like priests having kids or having wives is a good idea. But what's happened is there's a bunch of pedophiles or people who have pedophilia leanings will abuse the children, and that's the problem. Even if a pedophile does get married and have children, he still is a pedophile. That's the problem. The abuse of children is in the Catholic Church resulted from them not having enough priests.
Yeah,
and taking without training the people they are having come in.
Yeah, it almost became a way of, hey, an ideal career for the pedophile. We can do this. From the pedophile perspective, yes, we can do this, not get caught, or the church will save us. And this has been part of the problem.
Yeah, it's
so complicity of the church almost.
Yeah, they didn't want this word to come out. As remember, William O'Sullivan, when he was abused by a priest that went on then to abuse more, even when he was caught and then he was sent somewhere else. What they would do to the families is they would pay them off. They would pay off the family to stay quiet. In William O'Sullivan's case, his family was given $20-something thousand to stay mum about the priest. Now you would think, okay, if you're the family, and you would think, well, okay, this is an isolated incident. They're giving us money, just so that we don't make the church look so bad. So you might buy that argument. But what they didn't tell anyone is they did this quite often.
Yeah,
the church would come up with money and pay off the families, and I think I think William Sully had said that if you hold out for a little while, you would go from $20,000 to $40,000 basically to as a payoff, and then you had to sign a paper saying basically you're not going to speak of this anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
typical in in a lot of court cases around the world, court situations around the world, the parties just want to make it go away.
Yeah, and the biggest crime here, other than the fact that there were so many priests that abused children, it was the fact that the church covered it up.
Yeah,
they covered it up for decades, and when it started to become revealed, then it was hundreds of them, and then it became worldwide. And then, but the Catholics were obviously didn't want to believe a lot of this. I remember just in conversation with a guy I was working with. He was a devout Catholic, and I said, just, well, what do you think about all the abuse? And he got kind of angry. How much abuse? And I said, well, I just read about 139 cases. This was back in the 80s. Yeah, early 80s. I read about 139 cases pending. And then he says, oh, 139 priests. You know how many thousands of priests there are? I didn't get it. This was the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And the church effectively even fought it in the 80s and 90s, fought it very effectively. But then finally it couldn't stop any longer. And we find this popping up all over the world. Next thing you know, it's Ireland. Next thing you know, it's Australia. Then it's the Philippines. Then it's Chile. Then it's Brazil. And the current pope.
Well, and some of these priests were going from diocese to diocese to diocese. They were just moving around and moving moving their crimes with them.
Yeah, they had sadly, the Catholic Church would and they would try to retrain them and kind of hide them someplace. There was the one that went way up north. I remember he was a celebrated priest up north, and then it turned out that he had a long list of the reason why he was way up north is because they had to get him out of around here.
Yeah.
And so the Catholic Church tried to correct things, but not well enough. So what they did, instead of they put more little girls in with the boys. So they hoped that the priests wouldn't because it was the little boys that the priests were abusing. So they figured, well, we'll put girls in there. The priests won't meddle with them. But the more little girls got into it, they started abusing the little girls. The only reason why there was a preponderance of little boys is because there was more little boys as older boys and stuff. Once they started using little girls, then they would abuse the little girls too. So the church really messed up big time here. And their number one focus was,
the compensation on these Belgian abuses ranges from 2,500 euros to 25,000 euros, about $28,000.
I guess
so not a whole heap.
Yeah. So Pope was just saying, you got to do better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, ultimately, it's the Catholic Church that ends up paying these fines, of course.
Yeah, and
I'm not fine.
They say the biggest crime was their indignation that somebody else should be included in their own abilities to pay. Of course, the Catholic Church has tried to minimize all of this for a long, long time. The new Pope won't have anything to do with that right now. But what bothers me is this new Pope knew that this was going on all around him and didn't say anything at the time. They take orders from the church, though. and they have to take their orders from the church, whatever the church says. So even if you're a priest and you can see all this happening around you, if the church says, well, shut up about it, we'll try to fix it. They even took some priests to special places and schools of some kind where they could sort of de-pedophile them, try to fix them. But you can't fix a pedophile. That's the problem. And I don't know. Anyway, the Pope is trying to make some amends for all of this by asking Belgium to up its rates of compensation. This is a long history that the Pope has to try to overturn, and he can't do that. The church knows that they cannot pretend it didn't happen or pretend they're doing something about it. He has to be very obvious that something really is happening.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I noticed, by the way, that there was been right-wing advances. The FPO won a significant quantity of votes in the Austrian general election.
Yeah.
The Freedom Party of Österreich.
Yeah.
Just notice that was playing on this article from Reuters. Okay. Yes. All right. Moving on. This is question about Canada not needing to gear. Canada and its allies need to gear up for a conventional war.
Now this is a bit scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
No.
It's also been, I think, long time predicted. You know, the question here has been, people have been saying for quite some time that we're headed towards World War III. I wouldn't agree. I'd say World War III essentially started almost as soon as World War II closed, because World War III was this kind of war against communism, war against kind of things that the West didn't like, and that's been ongoing since since the end of World War II.
The very first line of the article says NATO's call for defense industrial strategies pulls Canada into a conversation it has avoided for decades. NATO says that it wants its members to develop national plans to bolster the capacity of the individual defense industry sectors, a concept Canada has struggled with or avoided outright for decades.
Yeah.
Now we can see the attitude. The previous government, the Harbour government, had arranged to have fighter jets built so that it could bolster Canadian forces. The Liberals poo-pooed that and said, we're going to cancel that order. We don't need no fighter jets. No, we don't need no fighter jets. What are we buying fighter jets for? Well, as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, suddenly the Liberal ideas changed, and they reignited that contract that the Conservatives had started and tried to do it as quickly and as quietly as possible. But it really did show you that the Liberals in particular were not in a good place. Their calculations of what the world would be were wrong. So much so that our defense spending was very low. Even when NATO said you got to bring your spending up to 2%, like you had promised when you signed this contract years ago, even then Trudeau says, "Oh well, it's too much for us. We'll get around to it over time." And we discussed an article here, the timeline, and at the time they said, "Oh, we probably never will get to 2%." So said the press and the government itself. But things have changed. Trudeau has promised that defense spending would go up and it would meet NATO targets. That was a complete reversal from when he began in office, and it was slow reckoning coming to that point, because they gave in inches at a time instead of just accepting the fact that that the world's a different place, and you speak softly and carry a big stick, but you need the big stick.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it wasn't only Canada too. It was a lot of the other NATO nations.
No, it wasn't only Canada. But the point being is that 2% doesn't seem all that much in the budget.
Well, when you're running deficit
it was lower
budgets,
than I would expect.
When you're running deficit budgets, it does make a difference. You know.
Yeah, true. When you're in debt, making that 2% is tough when you're in debt.
2% of the GDP, is it?
Yeah, 2% of GDP, and that's the bare minimum. You know, so as Mike is saying here, that's a bare minimum target, and Canada's not ready, nowhere near ready. Yeah.
Yeah, and guess who has a border with Russia? Basically, on
we do
in the north. We're the closest NATO country aside from the
Finland.
Baltic ones. Like we're close across the North Pole. Russia's pretty damn close to us.
Yeah,
and we've already been bickering with them who owns what in the Arctic. You know, the Russians claimed the North Pole recently, but Canada claims it too. So what we do have is the North Magnetic Pole, and we can threaten everybody by turning it off.
Oh,
like your compass, do you? Well, we'll turn this off. We'll show you.
Like we could even do that. Okay. Anything else on that? You know, clearly this is not going to go away. This question about, you know, not being ready is not going to go away. And with the advances of what's going on in Iran, what's going on in Lebanon right now, what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in the Ukraine, clearly there's signature out there that you know, nations have to be more prepared. Although, like you, I'm not a fan of going to war for anything.
Says one of the former top national security officials, several defense experts, and a retired senior military leader all say that for the last 30 years, Canadians and their governments have been happy not to think about such things. Now NATO is pressing the point.
Yeah.
We have been hiding behind, or, you know, just standing behind the United States all this time. They are on a war footing all the time because they are an imperial power. And so they have all kinds of weapons and spending and all that in those particular areas. And we've just kind of went along for the walk. Okay, yeah, sure, we belong to NATO. But you know what? The U.S. is here, so we don't have to spend that much money. And well, guess what? Things have changed. NATO has to prepare itself for it. Like NATO has these promises that it's going to come to the aid of anyone that's invaded or attacked. And it can't do that if it's not prepared. How is Germany or France or England? Well, England has, or Britain has pretty ready troops. Maybe France does too. But a lot of the other countries just do not. And is NATO coordinated well enough? Can they get their armies together? Can they get them together? And you know, they did during the Yugoslav crisis. NATO did a bunch of bombing there, but that was small potatoes compared to a major conflict. And the only way that, like, if Russia or China or anything else looks at NATO and sees a block of nations all allied together, ready to fight for one another, all for one, all for whatever. But they also discover most of those nations are not prepared to do anything. Their armies are old-fashioned. They haven't come up to, they don't produce enough weapons. As we've seen, that's a big problem. Production of even artillery shells is a big deal these days. They don't have enough. And we can't start building artillery shells or any other part of of a war machine. In order to have a war machine that you can use to protect yourself, it has to be ready. And if you're diverting funds from it because you got this big buddy next door that you can hide behind, well, that big buddy's getting a little bit pissed, isn't he?
Mm. Well, Vincent Rigby, who is a former national security and intelligence advisor to the Canadian government, is saying the next big war, it'll likely be a series. It could be a big regional war or a series of regional wars that Canada will be drawn into as a Western ally. So we better have our plans in place, including for mobilizing industry.
Yes, and we better be ready for a nuclear war footing too, tactical nuclear weapons, because right now we have Russia has threatened to use tactical nuclear weapons if the West gets too much involved. If they give too many sophisticated weapons to Ukraine, they feel they have no alternative but to use tactical nuclear weapons. Israel has nuclear weapons, and I just read an article about Israel potentially nuking Iran. Because if there's a protracted war between Iran and Israel, they're a tiny country, and if Iran's missiles are getting through, they may get desperate and use a nuke, and that is pushing Tehran to build a nuke. They're only what, a half a year away. That was a half a year ago from being able to make enough uranium for a bomb. So they're on the cusp of being a nuclear power. Pakistan's a nuclear power. It's a questionably stable regime that has elements of ISIS and Taliban and other Muslim insurgencies in its government. India has a nuke. Once the nukes start flying, where are they going to end? And are we prepared for that? Are we prepared for a war that involves tactical nuclear weapons? Basically, NATO is a rusty old machine, and it hasn't been maintained, save for the United States. Well, so the rest of us have to step up.
There was a time when with the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the the move away from the Soviet Union, that it was felt that Russia at one point would become a member of NATO, and and how much things have changed. And at that time, I wondered whether what was the point of NATO anymore.
Putin applied to become a member of NATO.
Yeah,
because he saw NATO expanding on his borders. They kept promising Russia they weren't going to expand NATO, but they keep doing it. And the last straw was Georgia and Ukraine. NATO had announced that Georgia and Ukraine were going to be entering in as NATO nations. Well, that was just the last straw for Putin. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, they're all part of NATO. They're right in on the borders. So what's Russia going to do, right? And their fleet, the Crimea, was part of in the Ukraine, and the Ukraine had licensed the Crimea to Russia to have its fleet there. The Russians conquered that area in the 1700s. They beat the Turks out of there and then put their fleet there. It's been there ever since the 1700s. So of course Russia was very very nervous about all of that. They crushed Georgia. Nobody went to help save Georgia, but when they attacked Ukraine, that's when we started adding missiles to the mix and elongating that war.
Yeah.
In any case, we do have also a Middle East war that's expanding. As we said yesterday, Bibi Netanyahu is the guy that's running the show there. If he wants a war in Lebanon, he's getting a war in Lebanon. As we found out yesterday, they have started the ground invasion of southern Lebanon. So he's definitely expanding the war. I don't think he'll ever give that land back. Right now, they're just testing the area, see how much resistance they're going to get. And if things go the way they planned, they'll just keep moving in and go right up to the Litani River, like I said, maybe even farther than that. But I think their borderline will eventually be the Litani River, and they'll chase as many. They've already chased a lot of the people out of southern Lebanon, and I think their goal will be to chase the rest of them out. And there's a Christian village I think they're attacking right now, or close to it. So they'll just force them out and take that land. And they might use it as a peace offering a little later on, so they get to keep West Bank or Gaza or something. But the United States, as I've said before, it's just too remarkable that the United States keeps getting humiliated by Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And that made me wonder, maybe this is part of the plan. It's good cop, bad cop, like I said before, that they're completely behind Israel and all what they're doing, but they're trying to make it look good. We're looking for peace. We're looking for peace. They keep saying that for half a year, but nothing comes of it. And they got Blinken jumping all over the place, and nothing comes of it. And every time they say, okay, we want peace, and the IDF should be a little more careful here, there, or other, they just ignore them. When they say they want to get food in there and the IDF ignores them, they just keep getting slapped around. But if it was part of the plan that they really didn't want peace themselves either, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. All right. Good morning, Karen Fraser. Good morning. Okay.
Morning, girl.
Moving on. Uri Berliner resigns from NPR. All right.
I put this one in now.
He then put an article up on the Free Press that he said in which he believes NPR is losing the public trust.
This is an old article, and the reason why I put it there, I came across it, I think I may have even put this on our discussed this earlier. I don't think we got around to discussing it when I put it in at another time. This is the problem we have with our news coming to us from our various different sources. He's saying that even the NPR is too far slanted to the left. It has too much of a liberal bias, and that is things that I have noticed from NPR, because I listen to NPR often, and what I have discovered in the last couple of years that there are too far leaning left bias. They jump on criticisms of Trump that are overblown. They entertain leftist views or left-leaning views. I think, and this goes for PBS news was even worse. They're better now. But they were getting to the point where they were just pretty much very much left of center, and their views were very much left of center, and it disturbed me. They have, however, now tried to bring that back into balance as I've watched the news. But this came up with NPR back in the 90s, too, when they were accused of being more left of center. In fact, a lot of Republicans and things like that refused to go on NPR to be interviewed, feeling they had their views would be skewed by the interviewers. This has to be expected, because most of the journalists that come out of universities and colleges these days are students that hold left of center views on typically young people do. And you don't get the crusty old journalism like Andrew Neil from BBC. who is a devout conservative, basically, but can actually do his real job and be a journalist at the same time. And the only reason why I put this back in there again is because of the poor news quality we're getting and the limited scope we're getting. Even when we have competitive networks like that, each one of them has a very limited scope on what they do report on. And that's why I was so shocked by NBC yesterday when we reported that they announced in their article that Netanyahu's calling the shots. He's the boss of the walk. And I was pretty shocked by that because they usually tote the line and don't criticize the Democrats that badly. And so that's why I put it in there. Even NPR has to make readjustments every once in a while. So with this guy, way back in April, I think he retired or he resigned, and he made his point. And I'm glad he did, because it kind of probably was a wake-up call for the NPR that they have to adjust their thinking again and get back to objective news.
I think we've lost.
I found that the PBS network was very much Trump against Trump back in that, and I don't mind them being something like PBS should not take a side, but they seem to have been doing.
Yeah, well, we've lost objectivity in the press a long time ago. You know, be honest about it, right? Okay. Moving on. Residential school survivors are fighting for access to records. The Linda Arndt of the Survivor Secretariat is a group that is working to find unmarked burials at the Mohawk Institute in Bradford. And over the past 2 years, her group has found records of 50 archival bodies that estimate 100 children have died there, and they're still searching the records. And the question here is that they're looking at records and how we can access those said records. Oh, Dave has gone missing again. So they're looking at the records, how we can access the records as part of Truth and Reconciliation. Right, and basically it's the survivor. What she's saying is the survivors are the ones that actually want to have records, want to get back, want to know what actually happened. They want the records of the deaths to be made public.
Well, this has been going on for a very long time, as you've known, and I was reading a article on the National Post just before the show began. So these records, and what the problem is, there's been these huge claims about Indigenous children being buried without record and stuff like that. It's appearing as if that didn't really happen. That these mass graves they're talking about were not mass graves at all, and that most of the hype of all this it's not even the Indigenous people's fault that this hype started, because foreign news agencies picked up on this and started to exaggerate stuff. The native, those speaking on behalf of natives, were talking about graveyards that had already been determined to be graveyards, and unmarked graves in those graveyards, not pretend ones that don't have a record with them. The big problem here in this article is they're trying to search out all the records of all the churches or other institutions, and actually the federal government has decreased the amount of funding for that. And why is that? Because they haven't found anything. They haven't found any remains of any child yet. All these places, the basement of one of those churches they're looking for that
they haven't found any remains of any child that hadn't already been previously documented.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is there's a bunch of children that weren't documented, or they were secretly documented. We don't find anything like that right now. Obviously, there was probably abuses happening, but nothing to the degree of what the newspapers took off with, that embarrassed the Pope enough to come here and apologize. But
Yeah.
even the Catholic Church is saying, you know what, we don't find records that come anywhere close to that. We're apologizing and all of that too. They haven't found anything, and yet it caused such a fervor. The reporting on Indigenous children being abused and buried with an unmarked graves and not being registered got so out of hand that I don't know how many churches got burned. I think 60 churches got burned and attacked or vandalized. Statues of Canadians got vandalized, and everybody says, "Oh my God, these people are monsters," and all that. But there's not a whole lot of proof about this. And the big fervor seems to have happened not in Canada, but began even in the New York Times, where they talked about mass graves, which to be fair, the residents, the Indigenous groups, were not saying the same thing that was coming out in the press.
Yeah.
So the kind of closure they want is they want to be able to determine all the different children that may have been forgotten, all that. But the records seem to be pretty good so far. And the records of abuse and so on, they have scanned them. The churches like the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church. Catholic Church had about 2/3 of the residential schools. The Anglican Church maybe had about 20 or 30% of them or something like that. And there were other groups as well. And the United Church had a small amount of them. Each one of them was run differently. And yet the records are not being hidden. But the demand for these records...
There's a few instances where records have been lost because of fires and things like that. But generally speaking, yes, the records are not showing the mass numbers that were expected somehow.
Yeah, and I think this. I just have to get to this article. Yeah, so residential school survivors are still fighting for access to records, and the government has actually reduced funding for all this research. So they're looking for these records, but what records? And for some survivors, it's a promise that they wish to be fulfilled before they died. So they just want to know. I've listened to survivors I knew, and I knew something happened. And then I sat with survivors who said, "My heart is broken, but now I can have peace because I'm not worrying anymore because I didn't want her to think I'd forgotten her," et cetera, et cetera. Regardless of who is searching for the records and why, always says that thing when she gets a call, "Welcome home." Well, this is called the Memory Project. But after the discovery of 215 potential unmarked graves of children in Kamloops schools in 2021, the Survivors Secretariat was established to search for unmarked graves in 600 acres of land encompassing the Church of England-run Mohawk Institute of Brantford, one of the longest-running residential schools. They didn't find anything, did they?
No.
Whether it's the church documents or Canada's numbers, we need to bring the memories of all these children home. We need to be able to grieve for them, to ceremony them, and all that. However, in Kamloops, discovery of Kamloops was a catalyst for the community's search for missing children, but they haven't found much, and that's the whole thing. The Orange Shirt Day was motivated by this. Riots and vandalism to church and statues were motivated by this. False or deceptive numbers. It got everybody all riled up. There was abuse, of course, and there's probably children missing, but I don't think it was anywhere to the degree that they're saying. 215 like children that they just lost the records for. I can't really see that happening in retrospect.
Yeah, and yeah, it's interesting, but again, this stuff would have all been recorded. Maybe one or two here and there were not, but I can't see hundreds, thousands not being recorded as have been
This is what
alleged.
the national report. This is what the National Post says: alleged mass grave of Indigenous children at Catholic schools across Canada contains no bodies, declared Britain's Daily Mail last Thursday. No human remains found 2 years after claims of mass graves in Canada, headlined the New York Post. It was the New York Times that were one of the ones that really got things going. And it says here, it goes on to say, this is a good article. I should really talk about it tomorrow. I don't think we have much time to talk about it today. I haven't posted it, so you haven't had a chance to read it.
Yeah.
But there's just one problem. And of course, this, unfortunately, they talk about it being an engineered hoax, which I don't think anyway. But there's one problem that claims that this was all an engineered hoax. The preliminary claims of the First Nations performing the survey did not state that these were mass graves, that they were deliberately concealing or they were a result of homicide. So they made no claims like that at all. At least in the beginning, the claims of mass graves or mass murder would seem mostly from foreign outlets. And the events of 2021 all kicked off with the May 27th press release of, I can't pronounce the name, announcing that the radar survey in former Kamloops confirmation of residential school found confirmation of the remains of 215 children. That's not what happened.
Yeah.
They found 215 anomalies. The operation for more than 80 years, the school had already been well known for having disproportionate rates of student deaths who were often buried on site. Using church and government records in 2015, final report to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was able to name more than 50 children known to have died in the school, but the 215 believed to be undocumented deaths, according to the statement, doesn't seem to hold much water. Yeah. Everybody's got really bent out of shape when this story got twisted. 215 mass graves. I remember a lot of news agencies warning that these were anomalies. They could or could not be mass graves. But of course, everybody likes to jump on the bandwagon. This doesn't bring any closure at all to the Indigenous people, of course.
No.
It's going to take a while to sort out what the real truth is here. But the fact that the Canadian government has reduced funding for all this already points to the fact that they figure that they've done what they can. And searching for bodies that aren't there is basically what they're trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. And, this is, well, I don't know. I'm lost for words. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Let's move on. So it's 85 years of shreddies in Niagara Falls. So I come with this with mixed feeling. Okay, it's good to see that Post have been producing this same food for 85 years in Niagara Falls. Not so sure about the quality of shreddies.
I don't know. I have a couple of friends that are addicted to them. They move to the States. They can't get them there. Every time they come up here, they load up with shreddies and go back. They always buy a couple of boxes of shreddies before they go back. I work just about this is one of the few products that are actually still made in Canada, but let alone Niagara Falls. That's found most of our industry hightail it over the years. So this is something that continuously is manufactured here. And I think it's cause for great celebrations. 85 years of continuous industrial process that can converts wheat into food. The Shreddies, if you look at the box of the Shreddies, they're fairly nutritious compared to other cereals. I think they're one of the ones that the food banks or whatever will allow to be given out at like Project Share or something like that, or recommended one of those. This outfit also gives the Project Share steadily food for
the
people.
picture in the article actually, there's plenty of Project Share bins around there.
Yeah, so if you look at the food worth of Shreddies, aside from too much sugar, but as far as cereal is concerned, it doesn't have near as much sugar as other ones do. So that it is a fairly balanced, fairly nutritious breakfast cereal, as far as I know. I don't eat them myself. I don't eat breakfast cereals, but so if you're going to have one, that would probably be the one to have. Also, how many people have worked there? I may have had. I was close to having a job there. Well, I did have a job there, but it turns out I'm allergic to Shreddies. And I worked there, and I had a massive respiratory problem, and actually had to be taken from the site in a taxi to my doctor's. I was covered in sweat and wheezing like crazy. And basically, they said, "Oh no, this happens once in a while. We get a guy in here that's allergic to the stuff in here," and that made sense to me because I was suffering for a couple of weeks, trying to wonder why I was so listless. I was 19 years old, and very athletic and very fit, and I was so listless and tired all the time, and trouble for getting my breath. And then finally, when I started to discharge the wheat cars, I was overcome completely. But my point is, just about half there are people who've had complete careers for many years there.
Oh yeah. And I noticed at the photo op that Mr. Gates and Mrs. Gates and Diodati were both there, congratulating the company.
Yes,
as was Project Share Operations Manager Joe Lowe and Camiso's president Rocky Camiso.
Yeah, this is one of the real survivors of Niagara Falls, all the old industries. If you talk to anybody that's worked in and around Niagara Falls like me, there was the Norton. I worked at the Norton for a couple of months. I worked half a year at Ohio Electric Minerals. I worked a couple of times at Nabisco or at Post, the Shreddies place. I had to leave again when I got a job in there as a contractor. Same thing happened to me. So they're the ones that survive. Norton's closing down. Electro Minerals still hanging in there by a thread, and a lot of the other big industries. And Bright's was a food processing place here in Niagara Falls, long gone now. So I think it is a real survivor. It started at the same time Niagara Falls started, 1904.
What, posted?
Yeah, I think, well, the factory, because it changed hands. Like, it's now Post, but it was Nabisco before that, and was something else before that.
Yeah.
But it's the same factory, just different names.
Yeah. And that factory used to be bigger, didn't it, at one point?
I can't remember. I think it's bigger now than it was when I was there.
Well, the reason I say that is because there used to be, you know where it is right now, there used to be a kind of arm across a kind of pipes and things across the road into another area that's now just a car park.
They might not need that anymore. The process may have been improved.
Yeah.
You never know. But anyway, celebrations to post, and like I said, for 85 years, it's been a constant employer for people. I was surprised when I went in there as a contractor and saw some of the guys I went to high school with that I hadn't seen since high school, and they had made a complete career out of working at Nabisco, and I had not known that, and like I said before, it is so many people have gone through there and had a job there that I don't know. It's a very good place for Niagara Falls. It's fed a lot of families here, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Okay, so congratulations on 85 years of Shreddies.
Yeah, Shreddy's nutritional facts. I'm going to bring them up right now. Okay, well, it says here it has potassium. You get 5% of potassium, 2% of calcium, 42% of iron, 92% of thiamine, 16% of your daily need for niacin, vitamin B, B6. You get 21%, folate 15%, something I don't even know, other percent. So they and let's see what it says about. I can't read this, but I was trying to figure out how much sugar it has and all that in it, but I can't read that. So it's not so bad, when you think of it. It also has 11% of your sodium, which is a little high, but not nearly as high as others. Fibers. I'm looking for sugars. It has 9 grams of sugars. Fiber. That's 24% of your fiber, so high in fiber. So if you're going to eat any breakfast cereal, that's one that you might want right there.
All right.
It's a pretty good one.
Okay. So, so essentially there's a big thank you card awaiting Wayne Thompson coming up. They're going to celebrate the special event for recently retired former mayor Wayne Thompson.
Yes, congratulations, Wayne. Again, we've done that over again. I think he would, if he hadn't lost his license, he'd still be sitting in that chair, though. But I think it was very much time for him to go. I mean, he lived. If you cut Wayne Thompson, he bleeds Niagara Falls. I mean, his whole world was Niagara Falls, and he's served the city for a long time. Sometimes controversially, but we're all human. I think he is probably a sign of the old days gone. I mean, when Wayne Thompson has passed on, or not passed on, but off council, it's almost like a signal that the old ways of doing things have actually come to have left us now. It's like it was a different generation of ideas and ways of doing things. So Wayne, so it'd be interesting. What was that last post?
I just put it up as I just put in there Wayne Thompson 2-hour event special Wednesday, October 9th, 4 p.m. at Niagara Falls History Museum, 5810 Ferry Street. Okay. So yes. Everybody knows.
Well, I hope that he can volunteer, stay active in a volunteer role. I think that would be good for him. I don't. I mean, this is something he's done his whole life, and to actually say to him, "Well, that's enough, Wayne. You got to go now." I think that's really hard to take. Really hard to take when that's been your whole life. So perhaps we can find things for Wayne to do that are volunteering and can help certain parts of the city, or be an advisor to people, but not a paid position, of course. I'm talking about, but I think in his his roles going forward, I think that may be a way for him to stay involved in the city.
Yeah, well, good luck to him, whatever he's doing. And I understand why there's a celebration, right, for it. So he turned 85 on September 24th, and he was first elected to local politics as an alderman in 1968.
He is the longest acting mayor. He's had 2 terms as mayor, and he's been involved in city politics for pretty much his whole life. And before that, he was employed by the city. I think he was bylaw or something. I can't remember. His father was a firefighter for the city.
Yeah.
So this city is everything to him, and so it says that his fingerprints are on just about all of Niagara Falls, one way or another, and he's a politician, so a lot of us have complained about him, but that's what politicians do, or people do. They complain about their politicians. But let me remind everyone here that's listening that the people of Niagara Falls elected him time and time again. So he had remained a very popular figure because he kept getting elected, even this last time when he was very old, and he didn't really look as if the age had overcome him. He still got elected.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think we can call it quits at that one.
Okay. One thing I'd like to mention here is in the city council meeting tonight, there will be mention of the cost of homeless people in Niagara Falls. If you go to the agenda, you'll find it. There's a report there on how costly the homeless people are for Niagara Falls. It's cost us for 338 homeless people. It's cost the city $520,000. It's like $1,500 per homeless person that the taxpayer has to come up with, and those are very conservative estimates that don't involve things like the fire department having to go on call steadily for homeless people. It's a real eye opener. It's something that most of us wouldn't be shocked about, but the degree of which it is. And this is a pattern going all over North America too, where the homeless people are beginning to look at homeless people as a pariah type. They are a non-producing parasite to the rest of us. It's an unfortunate way of looking at things, but that's the way things are moving. So we got to nip that in the bud so we don't get too far in that area. Anyway, it's something to discuss tomorrow, maybe. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace.